All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, Smarter Event Decisions that Start with Better Financial Tools. Our agenda today is first, we'll kind of go through a quick introduction to SVA, who we are. We probably met a little bit, or you saw us rather at the conference recently. So we'll go into who our team is, what we're composed of, and then we'll go through why we chose Acumatica as an ERP. We'll be able to get into a little bit more detail in terms of understanding event P&Ls. And then get down into the weeds of showing you some tools in Acumatica, showing you the financial structure and transactions, and then showing you events as well. And we'll start to understand the difference between your event subledger and your general ledger and how that helps you have a fully loaded P&L. We'll end with a call to action. So if you guys want to have a discussion with us or meet, I have my email in there so you guys can hopefully reach out and we'll set up a call. All right, so with that, we're first going to introduce ourselves here. So SVA, we're business people that use technology to solve business problems, always striving to serve people better. So that's certainly our mantra. We're composed of four separate teams. We have our business applications team that implements Acumatica ERP. We also implement, we're a Shopify partner and a big commerce partner as well. So we're also on an e-commerce side. We have a separate team that does data visualization and AI. Certainly when you guys saw some of the dashboards perhaps at the conference, that is what we were showing in terms of that team put together those event P&Ls and those dashboards. We have another team that works really on change adoption and program management. So especially with ERP solutions and business intelligence projects, the change can be pretty vast and pretty difficult. So we have a team that really is dedicated to helping with things like communication plans, understanding any change resistance and helping to work through that. And then we have a separate team that does early life sciences consulting as well. So on the business applications team that implements Acumatica ERP and is partnered with Momentus, we really serve a lot of complex and financial solutions. So think of multi-entity, maybe different sites, different departments, different divisions. We also do a lot of regulated industries. So if you do any work with the government, for example, or any HIPAA compliant or any regulated industries, that's where we really specialize. We have separate teams as well within ours that also does distribution and manufacturing. If there's a need to integrate with other systems, and certainly when we think about integrating between Momentus and Acumatica, or any kind of like a time entry or a payroll system, we have an in-house, all actually Wisconsin-based development team that can help to write those integrations as well. So we've been in business 30 years. We've implemented ERPs and actually have just started implementing Acumatica in 2010. So we've moved a lot of our older customers onto Acumatica that were on what's now legacy systems. So our average customer relationship at this point is almost 20 years. We have about over 100 customers now on Acumatica with over 700 successful ERP implementations under our belt. Now we'll kind of get into introducing you quickly to Acumatica ERP. First thing to note here is that orange score, that plus 44, that's that net promoter score, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But essentially, that's the likelihood that someone is to recommend for or against any kind of product. And so it's a score from -100 to +100. Acumatica rates really high at a positive plus 44, which means that users really like the solution. So on this slide now, you kind of see some of those accolades in terms of G2. So we like the G2 ratings because they're rated by users of the system, not industry analysts. So you see in 2025, best relationship. That means that as a company, they're very easy to work with. Best estimated ROI, return on investment, highest user adoption, best usability. And that really is obviously very critical when we start to think about ERP. What we like about it is that it's modern, it's born in this century, and the code base is being kind of updated and modernized, which allows them to do things like bring in AI into Acumatica. It does fly a little bit under the radar. You may have heard about it a little bit less frequently, simply because 75% of the expenditures there are invested back into the product rather than spent on things like marketing. In terms of scalability, we like that it's unlimited users. So it can be based on consumption volume. And so you don't have to budget for how many users you'll have in the system. So that invites lots of people in to kind of do reporting, approvals or what have you, and see things like an event P&L. We like how accessible it is. As long as you have access to the internet, you have access to Acumatica. It also comes with a mobile app as well. So you could do, you can see your dashboard on your phone, for example, or approve a receipt on your phone too. In terms of flexibility, it's very open architecture, like I mentioned. So if there's a need to integrate with other systems, lots of open APIs and framework there. We also like that it's very easy to upgrade. In terms of usability, you saw the accolades on the slide. We'll start to get into Acumatica in a few minutes, and you can hopefully see how easy to use and easy to personalize it is. And then certainly the functionality, right? So we'll spend a lot of time in core finance today, and we'll look at event P&Ls, which are really projects in Acumatica. So lots of different functionality there and lots of built-in things like multi-currency, multi-tenancy as well. All right, so that was just a little bit about SVA, kind of who we are, a little bit about Acumatica. As a note, Acumatica goes to market through value-added resellers, so folks like us, rather than going to market directly, right? So you always work with a partner like SVA. All right. So with that in mind, we'll kind of head now into understanding the event P&L and moving into what that looks like in Acumatica and how it's laid out. Okay, so you might have seen this slide during the event. It's really just kind of breaking down this event P&L. So if we start in the middle, we have kind of the green, which is the profit side. That would be coming typically from Momentous. So we have food and beverage, parking, security, right? Those are kind of direct cost for the event. And then on the loss side, this is what would be captured in your ERP system. So like hourly labor, utilities, event supplies. So things like, for example, an AP bill would be coded to an event. And as we move from the middle to the sides of the slide, we get into more variable expenses and revenue, and then also maybe some overhead as well. So accommodating indirect cost. So things like admin staff and software, sales and marketing, right? So those are expenses that we would incur regardless of if the event happened or not. And so we have ways to put it into your event P&L so you can see kind of what we call the fully loaded P&L all in one place, right? So the way that it does this is we have the cost side coming from on the left, right, coming from Acumatica, and the revenue side coming from Momentous. And so how it works, and certainly we don't have to use every single component because they might not all come into play. But if you have a purchase order or a commitment, that can hit the event. An AP invoice can hit the event as well. Things like expense reports, expense claims can also be tagged, as well as timesheets. So we can start to tag labor onto an event. Now you might say, well, I actually capture labor in something, like Kronos or Paylocity or ADP. That's just fine. We can ingest that into Acumatica and have the labor time and hit the event without also hitting the general ledger, which you'll see in the next slide. If there's equipment that you want to code to the event, that's available as well. So kind of from a cost perspective, that's what's natively captured in the system. Then with the integration with Momentous, we bring in things like obviously the AR, right? So maybe there's rate tables. Maybe we think about how we rate those differently. We code the revenue to different kind of tasks or different what we will call non-stock items. That would come into Acumatica and hit the event side. And so you could see a full event P&L. Now, that doesn't kind of get you at the end what the previous screen showed in terms of the indirect costs. And that's where that allocation comes in, right? So we can have an overhead allocation, for example, and that would, depending on various factors like the duration of the event, the number of days, for example, we can calculate overhead and apply that to the event so you can have that fully loaded event P&L. This one gets into a little bit of detail, but it's a nice visual to kind of show you, well, what if that hits my event P&L and I don't want it to hit my general P&L. So this just kind of shows you we have a project ledger, and that's really our event. And then it is separate from your general ledger, right? So what that allows you to do is have more sophisticated, perhaps more detailed P&Ls for your events without having to hit your general ledger for everything. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get into Acumatica. All right. So Acumatica is browser-based, it's browser agnostic. So I'm showing Safari, or I'd rather I have it loaded in Safari, but you could certainly use Chrome or any other type of browser. When I enter my credentials here, oh, Acumatica is role-based. So my user role has access to lots and lots of different types of administrative rights. And so you'll see I have lots of modules here on the left. But appreciate we can prune what people can see. We have that unlimited user model, which makes security extra important. Um, all right, so when I log in, I have a home page, and here you see this event P&L overview. And so what you're really looking at is Acumatica natively connects to tools like Power BI. And so I have an embedded Power BI dashboard here in Acumatica, and this is just showing me some numbers, right? So I can look at, okay, for these events, my year-to-date revenue, my year-to-date costs. And the nice thing is too, I can toggle between these and see some updates as well. So maybe for this specific event, I can see the date, the number of attendees, and then really drill down and see a little bit more detail, maybe in terms of profitability. And again, all of this data is coming from Acumatica, curated into in this case Power BI, but there's also native dashboards as well that you can use. This has some nice ability to kind of toggle and see. Maybe I want to see space utilization and different profitability, right? And so Acumatica, in terms of the project or event P&L, can capture different types of non-financial or operational data so that we can get these types of metrics like occupancy rate, usage rate, as well as, point of sale data as well. And really the way that I have this tagged and the way that I slice and dice this is really just the setup that I choose to have in Acumatica. So lots of ability to have, custom fields, things like attributes, if you want to look at the data in different ways. Okay, so just a little bit about, my homepage obviously is just a dashboard here. I'll just kind of give you a round trip of Acumatica, show you a bit of the finance, the core financial components, just give you an overview, and then we'll kind of end with an overview of the events and projects, which you see there on the left, and then we'll get back into a few of the slides. Okay. So in terms of usability, you saw that one was rated really highly for Acumatica on the G2 rating scale. So just kind of show you a few features here. So on the left, I've got all of my modules, right? And I can, let's say I don't use user security, right? And so I can select that and I can simply unpin it, right? And what that means is that it'll stop showing in the menu options that I have up. So, the key here is personalization, lots of ways to kind of personalize the views here. It's also really easy to find different information, right? So this universal search bar can be really helpful because I can search for, maybe I forgot where this page was. I can search for allocations like we were talking about. There's financial allocations I can set up. There's ones in the events and projects module as well. And so you can see the first kind of component of the search is the menu items. Next, I can search by transactions and profiles. And so if I have someone's phone number, for example, and I want to search there, I can also search in transactions, and then also help topics. So I'll search, maybe I want to learn more a little bit about a bill. I can search in help topics. And Acumatica has a really wonderful help documentation. They define every field in the system. They define workflows. They even have some process maps, which can be really helpful. Probably Bill is a lot, it will expose a lot of these topics. So that's probably why it's taken so long. There we go. So yeah, so it gives me different billing examples to find a bill. So lots of good information there. The other one that's really helpful is the files. And so Acumatica allows us on any record or any transaction or transaction line even, we can store files and file attachments. And so, and even search by that, right? So I just searched the word bill. I know I have some PDFs or attachments that have that word in them, right? And so you can see I have a sample bill. It's part of this transaction, and then I can retrieve that PDF as well, right? So it can really be a document search tool as well. All right, just going to show you a few components in terms of usability. So ability to personalize, ability to, if I have a menu here, like events and projects, and I have, lots of components here that I see, I can also click on this wheel icon. Let's say I don't really use commitments or purchase orders. I can unclick that, and that really means that I'm going to take that off of my main view. I can still find it. Maybe I just don't use it every day, so I don't want to see it. So I can kind of curate what I see in the menu items without having to change what my peers are seeing. All right. The other thing is we've got this. So here's my projects or my list of events. I've got, the status of the event, the name, the event type. Maybe I've got, I've tagged them by different sports or convention or meetings or what have you. This side panel here is also really helpful. In that if I look at the annual event here, the side panel will actually show me any information. And again, this is user enterable, so I can kind of change what I see here. But maybe I want to see a little bit about that customer record, Haven Hospitality. I want to see a little bit about maybe their billing or payment methods. I can just open this side panel here. I can even move this over. And what this allows me to do is have everything in one view and really have fewer clicks, right? If I want to see, I have different tasks for this project. So if I want to see any data on those tasks, I can certainly see that here as well. So I can look and say, okay, I have a planning, execution, post-event phase in this event. Here's how much I've actually spent. Here's my budget, and here's how much I have remaining. So you can see I'm actually a little over budget right now in my planning phase. And so this type of side panel view is really available across the entire system at any list view that you see here. It's a really good way to have fewer clicks and personalize the data that you see. All right. Okay, so as we kind of go through the navigation, we talked a little bit about the search bar, about the modules on the left side. If I click on this little timer here, oh, I don't have that set up, sorry. All right. If I click on this little clock here, it's a nice breadcrumbs tool. So I can actually see all of the pages that I were on. So if I wanted to go back without having to click around, I can go back to this like AP bill I was on, just as an example. Okay. All right, so we'll just do a quick kind of round trip of what we call the back office components, and then we'll get more into the project side. So just to kind of show you in terms of what's available in the native system of Acumatica, our financial structure really starts with the entities on the top here. So right now I'm in Crescent Grove Convention Center. But if I click down and I go to, let's say, Atlas Holding Company, now I'm in a different entity, and you see kind of this visual cue when I go to Atlas Holding. You see the blue come into play because that's a different legal entity. And so I can code transactions to that company as long as I have access to it. The next part of the financial structure is really the chart of accounts. And so what Acumatica does is it has a natural chart of accounts. Oops, so every single transaction is coded to first the entity and then the natural account. In this case, I have, just to show you an example, an asset account. It's coded to, petty cash for just as an example. And then we can really adopt whatever kind of numbering sequence that you want to use. The nice thing in terms of financial reporting as well is that this optional field in terms of account classes lets us really group and cluster different accounts together for reporting purposes. So if you have a new AR account, for example, you don't have to go and update all of your reports. You can just add that new account into your AR account class. All right, now this account group, I'm going to filter this and kind of show you where it starts to intersect. You saw that project or events subledger different than the general ledger. And so we have to have some way to tie those two together, because sometimes we do want to hit both the subledger and the general ledger. And so that's where this account group comes to play. And so when I set my allocation rule or my billing rules, I can really use these account groups, which are tied to things like direct labor costs or salaries and wages. And these account groups are what gets hit or set up rather on the project. And then when those accounts get coded to, and let's say an AP bill or an expense receipt, when these accounts get coded to, they will hit the project because it knows that this is part of labor, for example, or part of material, for example, and then also hit the general ledger. So this is a nice way to tie in, not for every account, obviously, but certainly the general ledger and then the project or the event subledger. Okay. All right. The last part of our financial structure. So we talked about the entities, we talked about the natural account, is our sub-accounts. And you can have actually up to 30 fields for your sub-account. And so this is really just saying, okay, I've set 3 different sub-account segments for this tenant. I have location, I have department, and in this example, I also have projects as well, which would be optional, or you could think of this as a different type of segmentation. But if I look at department, 'cause this one's pretty common, this is saying, okay, I'm going to code every transaction line to not only the entity, the account, and the sub-account, but in this case, to department as well. And so I can code to all of these departments, and this way I can see, my financial reports like a P&L by department or by division, for example. And so this lets you have that dimensionality into your financial structure, which can be really helpful. Today is really an overview, so just in the interest of time, I'll just do kind of a round trip walkthrough of of the menu here. So we have a master financial calendar. If you need to have multiple entities that have different fiscal years, that is possible in Acumatica to maintain. You can maintain a different calendar by entity. We talked a little bit about the chart of accounts and the sub-accounts, but there's also allocations on the financial side that you can do for things like headcount as well, which you can automate. Acumatica does have the ability to have budgets as well. So we can have budgets by your financial structure and then have pretty easy reporting to just say, your budget to actuals, for example. There's natively built-in financial reports. And if I click on this menu, you'll see the entire menu. But here, there's a financial report writer tool built into Acumatica that you can actually write different reports, set your row sets or your column sets. And the financial report writing is pretty easy to do as well. Okay. So just a round trip of the financial side, banking side, we'll go through pretty quickly. The big hitters here are the ability to use or process credit cards. So you're probably doing that in Momentus, but if you have other AR or other customers that's coming into your ERP directly and wanted to process a credit card, you certainly can in Acumatica. You can also pay vendors via check, via ACH. Under the payment methods. This bank feeds feature is pretty cool. What it allows you to do is connect to a bank using a bank aggregator like IMX or Plaid. And in that connection, you can bring in all of your bank transactions automatically and reconcile them. And so it imports your bank transactions, and then you go ahead and click this process button. And what this does is by cash account, you can basically have it auto match is kind of what you would do so that you're really having it run in the background. And then you are just, when you walk in, you're just dealing with what it couldn't match. But essentially everything on the left side is coming from the bank. Everything on the right side is in Acumatica. And so you can set different thresholds for it to try to match and find, okay, it found this transaction from the bank and it's trying to match it to that in Acumatica. So automated bank reconciliation that does use, an AI component to help auto match that as well. All right, and then in terms of payables, again, happy to kind of walk through these with you and your team in more detail, but in the absence of that, we'll just do a quick round trip. This incoming documents page can be really helpful simply because you can drag and drop or have an email set up to just automatically send in AP bills as PDFs. And then it's a processing engine, uses AI to read that PDF and create an AP bill for you. Also with, we have AP bill approval. You can also put approvals on the payment as well. There's ability to do 1099 as well. So Acumatica will actually create the e-file and do everything short of submitting it for you, right? So we can also do 1099 processing too. The receivable side will most likely come from Momentus, but again, if you did have, the need to do receivables outside of Momentus, we have all of those components in here, right? If you're also doing purchase orders and want to do a three-way match or a two-way match. Acumatica has the ability to do things like a purchase order. It can do a purchase request, which is, hey, I need maybe a computer and I don't know the vendor, but I can just make a request for something, right? So we typically see more decentralized or universal access to something like a request going into a smaller team to then review that request and then create a purchase order from it. Okay. All right, we'll kind of end the Acumatica component with showing you a bit more of events and projects. So you guys saw the screen earlier. We'll get into the project itself and just kind of do a round trip here. So this is that fully loaded event P&L. So a lot to see here, and we can certainly have the ability to hide some of these fields if they're not needed. But essentially, we have a project or an event. It will have a start and an end date. It might have a project manager that's assigned to it. And maybe, someone else who's an assistant, for example. Customer is an optional field, and this is important because what we can do is have internal projects, like maybe I'm repairing something or repairing a part of the building that isn't going to have a customer, but rather I really just want to track all the expenses on it. So you don't have to have the customer as, as a field here. Okay. So I've got the Crescent Gathering Annual Event Industry Leadership Forum. And then I can pick which way I kind of want to budget this. So I have a different revenue budget, different than my cost budget. And in this case, I'm just budgeting my revenue by task. And I'm going to have a little bit more detail with how I budget my cost. So what this kind of looks like is I'll jump over here and I've got different tasks. And you guys saw this a little bit before, but I have different phases, and that's how I've chosen to lay out my tasks. But again, there's lots of different functionality here that you could set your tasks as really anything that you wanted to. It's really a way, or think of it as a budgeting bucket, right? And so I have planning, execution, and then post-event. And I can have different planned start and end dates. I can have different actual start and end dates. In this case, I've got allocation rules. I could have a different billing rule. That might be less relevant, obviously, if all of your AR is coming from Momentous. So this is really the basis of my, my budgeting. So if I look at my revenue budget, I've really just budgeted for each task. So you can see that here, and I have original budgeted versus actual, right? And if I wanted to, I can also lock the budget. So there's a lock budget feature up here, right here, that really says, okay, I've made my budget and I want to lock it, which means no one can change it. I can revise the budget. There's another field for budget revisions, but maybe I always want to preserve what I had originally budgeted for that event. On the cost budget side, you saw a little bit more detail. First, I'm just going to group by task so you can see that. But now you kind of see the similar grain from the revenue budget, but I've got my planning phase, my execution phase. These are those tasks that we talked about. I have an original budget amount and then an actual amount. If I ungroup by task, and let's just kind of show you, starts with 100, so we can just show you what this looks like. Maybe I'm going to budget my tasks in a lot more detail, which is more common, right? And so in this case, I'm budgeting by what's called inventory ID. It also brings in non-stocked inventory as well. But in this case, I'm going to budget in my planning phase for ad dollars differently than I am for project manager, for labor, for example. Different than branding, right? So you can see that I have these different descriptions here and different items, and then even different amounts, and they'll come in differently. So I can get very, very detailed in terms of how I budget my cost. And then it rolls up. This is just one of the views, is that you can see my different buckets. When you saw that chart of accounts and you saw that account group, that's what this account group is, right? So we saw labor, you see labor coming in from time entry, you see a marketing expense coming in from AP, my project labor also coming in from time entry, my subcontractor as well, if I had any subcontractor expenses. So kind of aggregates here, and you can kind of see that high level P&L. And then at the top, it shows my actual income, my actual expenses, and then margin as well. As a note, if I had commitments, which are purchase orders, maybe the cost hasn't hit yet, but it's a commitment. And so I can see what that looks like here. And start to budget for those. Any AR invoices will show here. There's also change order and change request functionality. So we talked about locking that original budget. What that would mean is that anytime I need to change that budget, someone would have to submit a change request to change that budget. And then in that request, also provide the rationale for that change. All right. So with that, we can kind of show you a little bit more in terms of the dashboards and inquiries. You saw that homepage that we had that rolls up all of our projects into that Power BI dashboard. I can also search different types of inquiries and different types of reports if I want to see my project profitability, for example, a project WIP report. So these are all native out-of-the-box tools that let us see exactly kind of what what's going on with that project, right? If I wanted to do a project budget forecast, what that lets me do is forecast out across the lifespan of that task. So it'll take all the cost or the revenue components, look at the number of periods, and then forecast out what that might look like. Okay. All right, so in this way, you kind of see a little bit of the core components of Acumatica financials, like finance, banking, payables, and receivables. You see the project module as well, how we can set up the project to have different tasks, different kinds of budgets as well, and see when those come in from the different modules, how they hit the project. We have different types of inquiries and reports. We also have access to Power BI that can, in different ways, kind of roll up what that project might look like. All right, so with that, I will go back to the deck. And then if there's any questions, we can take those as well. So just kind of ending with, Acumatica is a pretty robust ERP. And it also has that project kind of subledger. Sometimes it's tough to know, do I really need a new ERP? So, thought these 6 questions could kind of help to answer that, right? So if you find yourself using lots of different tools or spreadsheets, to curate data, that might be a sign that you might need a new system. That also goes in hand with number 2. Lots of reentry, lots of errors, caused a lot by disconnected systems. If you don't have a real-time event P&L, that can be really difficult, right? Because you saw those costs coming in from maybe labor. It'd be nice to see those real time so you can make decisions. If you have to curate that way after the fact or way after the event is over, that can be really difficult. Slow billing and reconciliation. If AR bills take too long to come in and hit the event, that can be really difficult. That's why that drag and drop of a AP bill PDF coded to the project or coded to the event can be really helpful. So the easier it is to enter the data and get it right at the source, the faster that you're going to have access to data. Hard to scale or hard to integrate. Older systems can have older models or older modes of integration. So sometimes they might just have batch-based. They may not be able to integrate in real time. Again, that makes decision-making pretty difficult. All right. So we'll just end with, I appreciate you guys attending today. I put my email out here. Please don't hesitate to email, set up a call. Would love to kind of walk through what you're looking for further. All right.
Andrea, we got one question. Someone asked, can you help me understand why an organization would use this instead of the full financial package that Momentus offers within their own software?
Yeah. Yeah. So Momentus has 2 products. And I think there's the Elite product, which does have this, right? And so that would be duplicative of that. But otherwise, that's why they integrate with Acumatica, because there isn't that full ERP solution. And so if you wanted to see all those costs and all those overhead come in, Momentus would be insufficient for that, which again is why they have invested in that integration. All right. I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. It's Enterprise that obviously has the GL, not the Elite. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, please reach out, please email, and looking forward to hearing from you guys soon. And thanks for participating. Thanks.